Hello everyone, this is Stuart Meyer with Social Frequency, and today I'm here on behalf of the Michigan Society of Association Executives. I've been given the honor of presenting and facilitating one of the keynote sessions at this year's ORGPRO conference entitled, Your Life is Your Story is Your Life, How Will You Share Yours? You know, stories are like sparks in our lives, and we'll be exploring how our personal stories shape, guide, and direct or redirect our lives and our personal journeys in a true, authentic, and meaningful way. We're also looking at how association and association leaders can use the art and science of storytelling to define and strengthen organizational culture, foster identity, belonging, participation, loyalty, and influence. And as you might expect, this audio interview and the keynote session will center around inspiring stories and storytellers. And today we are extremely fortunate to have with us one of our amazing storytellers, Lisa Nuszkowski, who is founder and executive director of Mogo Detroit Bike Share, or as she told me, simply Mogo. Welcome, Lisa, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to get into Mogo, but let's take a few minutes to learn more about you and sort of your life story. So when you were growing up, what were your most authentic personal interests? I mean, those things you were naturally interested in and curious about.
Yeah, I was always kind of an imaginative child, a bit of a dreamer, and a little bit introverted because given my work today, you wouldn't necessarily know that about me. But I did a lot of reading as a kid, and I've always been really curious about the world and trying to understand how things work and why they do. As I got a little bit older in high school, I was a cheerleader, so I've always been kind of a positive, peppy person, and was on student government as well. I was the class president for 3 years. So it was around like high school when I think you can kind of start to see who I am today really begin to emerge.
What would you say was the spark that fueled those early interests? You know, what sort of inspired you in those directions?
You know, I think on some level, I have always been interested in being a leader in some way. I really like the idea of taking an idea or a thought or a problem or an issue and mobilizing people around it to solve it and make life better for people. And that's manifested itself in several different ways throughout my career thus far. But I think really it's leadership is kind of the common thread that pulls it all together.
So when you were growing up and going through, you know, cheerleading and these leadership roles and sort of being inspired in that direction, what were some of the things that you always wanted to accomplish in life as you look toward your future growing up?
I actually really struggled with what I wanted to be, and I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and so there wasn't, well, I always knew I was going to be going to college. There wasn't necessarily like the clear pathway kind of set before me, you know, and my parents, who did an incredible job of providing, you know, a wonderful, well-provided for, loving home, didn't necessarily have the professional experience that I thought I would, the direction that I would be going in someday. So I really didn't know. I kind of feel like I've been making it up as I go along, and feel very fortunate to have landed where I have.
Absolutely. Well, from the, you know, sort of those beginnings, you know, how did that further inspire your leadership and your interest in and your drive for all that you've done?
It's made me very resourceful. You know, I've had to, you know, kind of figure things out. Certainly not on my own. I've had lots of, you know, great support along the way. But, you know, really, having to be resourceful and kind of, you know, understanding what's important to me and finding out the best way to get there.
Awesome. And so as a graduate of both the University of Michigan and Central Michigan University, tell us a little bit about your career track, which has sort of led to present day.
Yeah, so when I got into undergrads, I went to undergrad at Central. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with myself, and so I just started taking a bunch of different classes to see what sparked my interest. And I gravitated towards political science. I thought it was very interesting learning about how others have accomplished a lot through political careers and how they've used various systems, whether that be government or whether that be organizational systems, to improve life for people. And so I thought that was really interesting. Had some really inspiring professors who, I learned from, and did a couple of internships when I was in school, and thought that this could be a direction that I was really interested in. But I wasn't necessarily interested in political science from an academic standpoint. And so while getting a bachelor's in political science was enjoyable, it wasn't necessarily the most marketable thing. So trying to figure out how to translate that into something that would give me the skill set that I could go out and do things in the world with. I had a friend who was a couple of years ahead of me and had just finished a master's degree in public policy, which is ultimately what I went on to do. And it was really through some conversations with this friend who encouraged me to check out policy programs. And so I was like, well, sure, I seem to be pretty good at school, so I'll continue on this track, and applied for a handful of programs, and ended up going to the University of Michigan, the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy, which is an incredible institution. And really, it was there that I really found my footing, and was my introduction to Detroit. So I'm from the Flint area, had never really spent much meaningful time in the city of Detroit. And it was in doing an internship between my first and second year while at the Ford School that I came to Detroit and worked in the mayor's office then, and fell in love with the city, fell in love with the people, and wanted to come back here and make a difference, which is what I did when I finished graduate school. I moved to Detroit and have been here almost 15 years.
That's incredible. So growing up in Flint, I mean, obviously that probably inspired a lot of your need to step forward and lead. What was that like?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in the city proper, but certainly, growing up in an area that is, blue collar, working class, that background really resonates with me, and so I felt a lot of similarities when I came to Detroit. So I mean, a lot of people just see the challenges, but I also see the opportunities of, both were cities that had built themselves around an industrial manufacturing model, and as the world changes, the city is both cities need to change along with it. And for me, it's a really interesting and important set of challenges to think about how we can do that in a way that is equitable and brings everyone along. So that's some of the most interesting part of my work today.
That's great, and really a powerful thought that, where some people see challenges, others people see opportunities. And I think that's a big part of, how we shape our stories in life and what we decide to pursue. People look at things differently, and ultimately we have to look at things through our own eyes and not through the eyes of others or the influence of others necessarily, and making those decisions on the way forward. So, well, thanks to social media, there's lots of ways that we can get to know each other even before we're able to sit on opposite sides of a computer as we are today on a video conference. Of course, this is just an audio interview. But, back in December, I noticed on Facebook, before Mogo became a nonprofit, you posted the following quote from a former mayor of Bogota, Colombia, Enrique Peñalosa, that says, "A bikeway is a symbol that shows a citizen on a $30 bike is equally important as a citizen in a $30,000 car." What inspired you to share this quote?
Yeah, I love that you found that quote because I still find it inspiring today. So, I mean, what inspired me about that then and now is that, you look at the way we shape many of our communities, and by default, that's sort of been largely around the personal automobile. So, we've got, the Motor City, Detroit, obviously has a deep, rooted connections with the automobile industry. And we've made a lot of decisions around building our city and how we shape our streets that really prioritize people who are able to afford and drive cars around the city, and that's often at the expense of others. And so you've got roads that are meant to get people in and out of the city really quickly, but those have often carved up neighborhoods, destroyed communities, and then oftentimes had real health and safety impacts for people. And so thinking about ways that cities can invest in their infrastructure in a way that supports not only people who are driving cars, but people who are also taking public transportation, or people who are biking, or people who are walking. In a city like Detroit, which has one of the highest bike and pedestrian fatality rates in the country, it's no surprise to see that because we are shaped largely around the car, that we have some of those results, and that we can make different choices and make it, our roads more safer and welcoming for everyone. And so for me, that quote is really about equity, and that just because you are maybe at a certain income level doesn't mean that you necessarily should have to sacrifice safety or comfort level to be able to move around the city. And so they've been doing some really incredible work in Bogota around reshaping their city so that it's welcoming, inviting for people, and that it's not just about cars, it's about the people who are in them ultimately, and cars are just but one tool to move people around. And so I still take a lot of inspiration from that today in the work that we're doing.
Well, it's definitely a very powerful thought in the notion that progress begins with us moving forward. I mean, the Industrial Revolutions, a lot of advancement in society has traditionally been led through transportation. And I think it's just so incredibly fundamentally powerful, both between this quote and everything that you're doing, is empowering transportation in this age of technology and amazing science, that, something as simple as a bicycle can be transformative, which is really cool. So did you have a relationship throughout your life with bicycles in terms of that as a mode of transportation?
I certainly rode a bike as a kid. I have a very distinct memory of riding around in our home's driveway and going in a circle faster and faster, and my dad warning me, you're going to fall. And eventually, yes, I did fall, but those are some of the hard lessons you just have to learn through experience and not necessarily listening to your parents. But so while I rode a bike as a kid, I didn't have any especially strong connection to it. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really anything more. And then it was through serendipity that I got into this field. So when I was working at Wade State University in the Office of Economic Development, we were approached by a couple of members from the community who were really interested in bike sharing, and this was 2012. It was just something that was starting to pop up in cities throughout the United States, and they were interested in having Wayne State convene a conversation with other members of the community to talk about what bike sharing could look like in Detroit. And so I really happened to be there, at the right place at the right time, and said, sure, I'd be happy to, take on this project, and would never have guessed at that in a particular moment in time that 6 years later I would be, running the city's public bike share system. So it was serendipitous but beautiful, and I will say, I certainly ride my bike much more now, given the work that I'm in, than I probably have at any other point in my life.
That's great. Well, moving deeper into the story of Mogo, tell us more. You kind of started off there, but how did it lead to the point where Mogo became a full-fledged organization and movement?
Yeah, so we had our that first community conversation April of 2012, where we brought together business, community stakeholders, and talked about the concept of bike sharing. And I think while there was a lot of interest, there were also a lot of questions around what would something like this look like in a city like Detroit that is very car oriented. And so we did a feasibility study, so raised some money for that and did a feasibility study in 2013, and then through that study found that we're actually really well positioned for bike sharing for a number of reasons. We had a lot of the right stakeholders already around the table. One of the benefits of our really wide streets is that, we used to have a population of nearly 2 million people. We now have less than half of that. And so we can repurpose our streets to accommodate a wide variety of uses, including biking, in a way that, some of the older cities that have, much larger populations and are much more space constrained aren't necessarily able to do so. Detroit has, an ever-growing bicycling culture. I think, as of today, we have something like more than 60 neighborhood bike clubs. We've got large organized rides like the Slow Roll, which takes place every Monday during the summertime, the Tour Detroit, which is an annual 30-mile bike ride throughout the city. So Detroiters had already really been turning to the bicycle. And so, we really wanted to sort of push that a little bit further and think about using the bike not only, for recreation, but think about it as, a tool for moving around for transportation. And so when the study said, kind of pointed out all those reasons, I think a lot of the stakeholders around the table felt much more comfortable that bike share could be successful in Detroit. And then we really use that as the foundation from which to raise financial support and build momentum to launch the system, which we ultimately did in May of 2017.
Awesome. So let's go deeper into Mogo. Tell us how it functions. Who are your key customer bases? Is it just locals that use it? Do tourists use them? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so we pride ourselves on being a service that can serve a wide range of people and needs. So I would say all of the above to your question. So whether you're somebody who's just in town, who's visiting for a day or the weekend, whether you are a resident, whether you're somebody who commutes into the city 5 days a week, whether you want to use it for recreation, whether you want to use it for transportation, it can really fill all of those needs. And so we've really tried to be as expansive about locating the stations, making sure that people sort of understand the different ways to use it, and like I said, really not trying to limit it to any one kind of use case. But a bike can be used to go to a meeting just as much as it can be to sneak in an extra 20 minutes of physical activity on your lunch break. And so we've encouraged all of that as we've launched.
So to someone who can't visualize or has never seen a bike share program in a large city, describe the whole experience from the time you spy this line of bikes to the moment you're turning it back in.
Yeah, so in Detroit, we have a station-based system. So we've got 43 stations with 430 bikes located in 10 different Detroit neighborhoods. And if you are a more casual user, so like I mentioned, somebody who is just here visiting perhaps, you can walk right up to the station and there's a kiosk and a touch screen. You touch the touch screen, follow several prompts, and purchase a daily pass, which is $8. And with that, you get an unlimited number of free 30-minute trips with that. And our system is designed that way, again, to encourage people to think about this as transportation. It's really about getting from point A to point B. So, our office is right off of Campus Martius, which is a beautiful park in downtown Detroit. And we've got one of our biggest stations right here. You could check a bike out from the Campus Martius station, and then ride that bike over to Eastern Market, check it in at the station, at Russell and Wilkins Street, shop around the market, and then if you wanted to, you could take another bike back out. You could take the bus, you could take an Uber or a Lyft. So it's a really flexible form of transportation. Just as long as you're taking it from a station and returning it to another station, you're all set. So I think people really have appreciated that aspect, and that you don't have to be responsible for locking up a bike, taking it home with you. If it's your own personal bike, you just are responsible for it when you have it checked out of the station. But then when you return it, the responsibility is back on us for us to maintain that and make sure that everything's working properly with it.
Well, being a father and a husband who has just picked up 3 bikes from being tuned up for the season, I can certainly relate to the notion that someone else is responsible for making sure that the bikes are in good working order out there. So how would you, Lisa, summarize sort of the goals of Mogo and the way that you all envision it will transform Detroit as it continues to progress forward?
Yeah, I think on an individual level, we want to get people to think differently about how they move around the city. We are notorious for getting on our cars, driving a half a mile down the street, where in other cities, you just wouldn't necessarily do that. So we don't have, as much of the culture of walking and biking here. And so I think things like bike share, making it very easy and accessible for everyone to use, that is something that we're certainly thinking about. And then we also want to be a catalyst for Detroit to really be a leader in mobility. The city of Detroit has been a leader in mobility. We help put the world on 4 wheels with the car, and while bikes are certainly not going to solve every transportation need, they can be a really important piece in thinking about how we get around. And so, we're very close partners with the city of Detroit and other governmental entities that serve this area, and making sure that we're providing the data from our system so they can understand how people are using bike share, where they're using it, and help inform some of the policy decisions around how we're investing in infrastructure and where we're putting in bike lanes and things like that.
And how have things gone over the past couple of years?
So we're just approaching our first anniversary. We've had a fantastic first year. We projected about 100,000 trips in our first year, and we have far exceeded that. Like as of today, we're about 135,000 trips, with still just under a week to go before our 1-year anniversary hits. So just seeing the incredible response from people has been really encouraging for us. And then also too, we've got I mentioned we've got a walk-up pass option, but we've got lots of options for people who live in the city and spend time here regularly. So we've got monthly and annual passes, and then we've got something that we're especially proud of, which is our Access Pass, and that is a $5 annual pass for anyone who receives state benefits. So we wanted to make sure that cost was not a barrier for people to using the system. So you could, go onto our website and just like anybody else, purchase a membership for $5 and be able to use Mogo over the course of the year to get where you need to go. So we've really, tried to build this on a foundation of equity and making sure that what we're producing is affordable, accessible, and welcoming to everybody.
That's great. And how do all you, I'm fascinated, how do you all use technology? Clearly you're able to track everything, but what is the role of technology in this program?
Yeah, so we have GPS on the bikes. So, we're able to tell, which stations they're located at. We can tell like who checks out a bike, when, from which station they return it to. And so that's really useful information to understand like how these trips take place and where people feel safe in using bikes and maybe where they don't, and help inform some of the decisions that are made around that. And then we also use, we certainly use the smartphone, much like, everyone else these days. So there are a couple of apps that we use. The most important one really for us is the Transit app, which not only has information about Mogo, and you can purchase a pass and unlock a bike just using your smartphone, but you can also see exactly like what other forms of transit are nearby. So you can see, if I'm standing here at this intersection, which bus lines run in that along that road. You can also see, how much a Lyft or an Uber trip would cost, and so it really helps people with their trip planning and thinking about what's the fastest way to get from point A to point B. It may be the bus, it may be a bike, it may be an Uber or a Lyft trip. So really, again, I think it's been a helpful tool in helping people see the different ways that they can get around the city.
Awesome. And is Mogo influencing sort of infrastructure improvements and streets and roads as you all continue to work in partnership with the city of Detroit?
Yeah, I think, we're one of many reasons. We certainly can't claim to be the only one, but it's been really encouraging to see kind of concurrently as, we've rolled out bike share, that the city of Detroit has been making some major investments in improving the infrastructure around the city. So we've got the city's real long first protected bike lane on Cass Avenue that was just installed in 2017. And then over the course of the next month and a half, the city is going to be transforming Jefferson Avenue, which in some places is a 9-lane street that runs from downtown to the east side of Detroit and suburban communities. We'll transform that street into, by giving it a road diet, shrinking it up a little bit, still having plenty of lanes for car traffic to move through, but also now having a protected bike lane so that there is physical separation between moving vehicle traffic and bikes. So that's definitely something that we're really encouraged to see, because now we know that more people are likely to use the bikes when they feel safer, and particularly along some of those main corridors and arterial roads. So we share our data with the city of Detroit so that they can understand how people are using bike share and help inform those future decisions. And we'd love to see more of that coming down the pike from the city.
That's great. That's really great. Are there ways that Mogo has used storytelling in its mission, development, and in sort of growth as time has gone on to win hearts and minds?
Yeah, it's something that we're thinking about a lot now, right? So we've, just collected almost a year's worth of really incredible data on the system. But when you can hear the numbers and they sound impressive, but to be able to put a face to them, to say, exactly like how having access to a transportation service like this has impacted people's lives is something that we're focused on a lot this summer. Is really kind of diving deeper. And so now that we know people are using it, and we can tell from any kind of a high level perspective how they're using it, but we want to know like more so like how are you as an individual user using the system, how is it impacting you? And so we hope to do a lot more storytelling, because I think that that's something that is really compelling, not only for potential funding to expand and grow our system so we can serve more people, but also to encourage other people to try the system as well. Once they say, oh, well, if so-and-so has used it, then maybe I can too, and they might see something for themselves in that. So, doing, I think, a better job of telling those stories and making sure that we're representative as we tell those stories. We've always been very conscientious about, making sure that we're reflective of the city that we serve. And so those are definitely things that we're thinking about this year.
So using data to tell stories, obviously using the enjoyment of the bicycles to tell the story, but I think it'll be really powerful once you all begin to tell some of these stories on how this program probably has changed people's lives and their ability to get around, their ability to get to work more efficiently, or maybe get to work for the first time. Just really, really incredible from that standpoint. Now, speaking of stories, as you told me before we started here, there's a big story today with regard to the program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as we have approached our 1-year anniversary, we are adding about a dozen adaptive cycles to our fleet. And so most of our fleet, the 430 bikes, those are standard 2-wheel step-through frame bikes. But what adaptive cycles are is they're really designed to serve people who may have varying ranges of abilities. And so, we've got some hand cycles, some tricycles, some tandem bikes, recumbent bikes. We even have a cargo bike to be able to serve people who may have physical or cognitive impairments. And so, as I mentioned, making sure that we're being as inclusive as possible, and really, kind of opening up the definition of serving all and thinking about what are the areas that, we may not be able to do that with our current system. That's really opened the door for this pilot program to launch. So we just launched that on Tuesday, and we'll be running that through October 31st of this year, and then using the data as well as the stories that we get from people who have used the service to evaluate how we move forward, how we should provide the service, what will provide the most value for people. But very excited to make sure that we're providing bicycles and cycles for everyone who wants to use them.
That's outstanding. So, and Lisa, you've done so many great things in your career. Obviously, a strong, public service is a big part of your story, and improving society is part of your story. But with regard to Mogo, what was the initial spark that inspired you to see the possibilities in this, and what inspires you today in your role as executive director?
I think that really for me, like the opportunity to transform how we think about moving around. I love to travel. And so as I visit other cities, one of my favorite ways to experience new places is to take public transportation, because you see places and people that you don't if you're just in your own little, steel and glass box of a car. And so, I think that that's something that Detroit and the region has really struggled with. We've got transportation and certainly improving public transportation, but it's still largely fragmented and doesn't, serve the needs of people, I think, to the best of the ability that it could. And so, while bike share is just one component of that, we're not under any, false pretenses that bike share is going to, single-handedly transform mobility for everyone in the region. I do think it can be an important catalyst for getting people to think differently about how they move around. And so, really, I think, bike share being both like a literal and figurative vehicle for having that conversation has been really important. And then something just that's also personally important to me and has been a theme throughout my career is making sure that opportunity is available for everyone. And so, making sure that all the work that we're doing is through a lens of equity, and making sure that we're not building something that is only speaks to a certain group of people, or is maybe only meant to serve a certain group of people. And as we get more people moving into the city, there's a lot of questions around who are these investments and developments and changes for, and who are they benefiting. And we wanted Mogo to be something that anyone could take a look at, whether you're a visitor, whether you're a lifelong resident, whether you're a commuter, and be able to say there's something in that for me. And so between our affordable pass option, the ability to be able to pay with cash, our adaptive program, a bunch of free programming and classes that we offer to people who maybe want to learn how to ride a bike or learn how to ride a bike confidently in an urban environment. We want to make sure that the service that we're providing really is for everyone. And so that to me is something that is never an achievable box checked, we're done. That's something that, we have to show up every day with our eyes on that goal, but being able to model the kind of approach that I think many other organizations could take as well in their work. I think that just will produce benefits for everyone who's in Detroit and help us build a more equitable and inclusive city overall. So transforming mobility and doing it in an equitable way are the two things that really inspire me.
That's great, and a wonderful segue to one of my last questions is, really when you look back upon your life to this point, as well as the pathway ahead, pun fully intended, what is the story you hope that your life is trying to tell to others?
I would have to say is that, having a vision for something and being able to take something just from an idea and creating something from that idea and having it manifest and then provide value to people's lives. I know I'm currently doing that through Bike Share, and it's been really, truly one of the most humbling, greatest joys of my life to bring something like this to fruition and to do it with a team of people who care about the same things that I do, and feel like we can make a difference in that way. And so, I feel like I would certainly want people to see that anything is possible with enough dedication and passion that you can actually make a difference, for yourself, for your community, and you can feel really good while doing it. And so it can be something where everyone wins. And so I feel incredibly fortunate. I pinch myself every day when I walk into our office or see someone riding our bikes, that we get to do the work that we do and hopefully in some small way improve the quality of life for people who use our service. So it feels like I'm almost selfishly getting more from this than I'm giving, which just encourages me to want to give more and do better in what I do every day.
Well, final question, any advice you'd have for others searching for their story's spark?
Yeah, I couldn't, like I said, could not have predicted that I would be doing what I was doing. There's nothing, in my childhood that would suggest I would be running a public bike share program. But I think being open to what the universe sends your way. I mean, this was an opportunity that presented itself, and then I kind of took it and run with it. And as I did that, it got more and more real for me, and all these other possibilities and opportunities and doors kind of opened as a result of that. So sometimes it's just, it comes in unexpected ways, but just be open to what may be presenting itself to you. And it may not necessarily seem obvious at first, but you never know. It could end up, being, a fantastic opportunity like the one I'm in right now.
Well, Lisa Nuszkowski, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for everything you do for Mogo and sharing your inspiring story. And I very much look forward to being on the stage with you and meeting you in person next time at ORGPRO in Detroit in July.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.